All right, tonight a local man says that he has come face to face with Bigfoot, and now he's getting ready to launch balloons to spot the creature.
Here's Neda Iranpour with how he hopes to do it.
A Grass Valley gold miner used to go camping up to 5 months straight every night, just him and his tent, until the night a creature came running right towards him.
I heard something coming down the canyon. It just wandered left and right and made a beeline straight to the tent. It was close enough where I could reach to the tent and touch it. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it in my ears.
William Barnes never the same after his encounter.
No nose, and just big.
This gold miner was camping near Greenhorn Creek in July 1997. He claims at 2 a.m. he came face to face with Bigfoot.
It took me 4 years to mention it to the first person, one of my best friends.
Once William opened up about his heart-stopping sighting with a 500-pound ape, he found out he was not alone.
About 80% don't report it.
Why?
Because they'll get ridiculed.
But William says 16 people in the area told him they've seen the same monstrous mystery. So with all these sightings around here, where are the footprints? William hasn't seen any here in Nevada County, but he says just look at the ground. It's covered in these thick rocks and all this gravel. There's no way any creature, even a 500-pounder, could leave its own footprint. So William will set out on a road less traveled, spending a year and $200,000 hunting for Sasquatch from the sky.
I want to film it in the wild. Not for 1 minute, not for 5 minutes. We want to collect about 45 minutes of filming.
He plans to fly 35-foot helium balloon over 13 different states where sightings were reported, watching and recording with thermal imaging cameras.
If you're breathing at nighttime, I can see you.
He says Project Falcon, as he calls it, will prove to the world his encounter was real.
I have no doubt what I saw. No doubt at all. Guarantee it. So I know they exist.
William just wants to capture this creature in its natural state, and only then he'll be able to rest easy at night.
Face to face with fear, the forest encounter of Michael Hollish. My Uncle Jerry passed away back in 1987 and had left a small plot of land and cabin to me in his will. We had never been particularly close, but aside from a few distant cousins, I was the last of his immediate blood relatives. I remember Dad and Uncle Jerry talking about going up there as young men on week-long hunting and fishing trips and how they loved that place. It never dawned on me that for a place that they loved and spoke about so often, I'd never heard newer tales of their exploits at the cabin. I guess I brushed it off as getting older, having families, and life just generally getting in the way. Well, Uncle Jerry did say once, in passing after we lost Dad to a heart attack back in the early 80s, that he would never go back to that cabin alone. I assumed it was because it wouldn't be the same without Dad, and it would probably bring back too many memories. I soon found out for myself why he would never return to that cabin alone, ever again. A few months passed and spring turned to summer. I decided to go visit the property for myself and give it a once-over. I had no idea what condition it would be in and decided to bring a tent along for backup, in case the roof was caving in or other structural damage may make it unsafe to sleep in. I planned a long 3-day weekend to go check it out and take in a little fishing for myself. Who knows, maybe crack a beer in honor of my uncle and dad while I was there. It took the better part of the day for me to reach the cabin, and to my surprise, it was in pretty good condition. A few broken panes of glass, but overall pretty sound. I set up my tent anyway for backup, just in case the inside was a little less inviting. After sunset, I started a fire in the old stone fireplace and settled in on a folding chair, sipping on a cold one and relaxing to the sounds of the crickets, cicadas, and frogs. That's when I heard what sounded like heavy footsteps on the stairs outside the front door. I waited for a knock or someone to call out, but there was nothing. I figured it may have just been the settling of the old wood, and my mind was again at ease. That gave way quick enough when a bit later I glanced out the window of the cabin and could see the dark outline of a huge form standing there, staring at me, watching me. My heart raced. I thought to myself, Damn it, why didn't you bring a gun? Creepy hobos have probably been making this their home for God knows how long. I stood up and faced the window and yelled, "Can I help you with something?" It just stood there. I moved forward, slowly, and it seemed to move back a step. Then I heard a strange grunt by the front door. My head whipped around, and I stared at the door. I hate to admit it, but I was frozen in my tracks. When I glanced back to the window, the large form had gone. I waited a bit and went to the door, slid the lock into place, and listened. It was eerily quiet. I couldn't even hear the sounds of crickets or frogs croaking any longer. It was like the place had come to a standstill. I can't recall how long I stood there not making a move, but man, was I glad I was not outside in that tent. Eventually, I crept to the small pantry, laid out my sleeping bag, and crawled in after shutting and securing the door the best I could. It was a long, dark, creepy night, and the silence would be occasionally shattered by the sound of something big screaming in the woods. It sounded like no animal I had ever heard before. When the sun finally rose, I gathered the courage to go check out the front window. My tent and belongings were strewn all over the yard. I figured it had to be whatever or whoever was outside the night before. I made my way into town and stopped by the sheriff's office and explained what happened. They assured me it was most likely a couple of bums and I shouldn't worry. Now that they know someone is up there, they'll just most likely move on until I leave. And then they encouraged me to sell the property or maybe look into a caretaker. I grabbed a few more provisions in town and headed back to the cabin. Everything seemed great in the daylight, except the pungent smell that seemed to be all around the outside of the cabin area. I ducked in, put my stuff away, and determined to do a little fishing, set out, found a nice place along the creek, and had at it. All in all, a pretty good day and a nice haul for an unseasoned fisherman. As I started back to the cabin, I heard something moving along in front of me in the woods, the cracking of branches and snapping of woods. I called out to see if anyone was there, and my answer came back in a response of a large, softball-sized rock being hurled at me from my left, landing just inches away, and it hit with a thud. I hauled ass back to the cabin, slammed the door, hit the locks, and peeked out to see what was there. And I could see nothing at all. I cooked my fish for the night and noticed the smell had seemed to have gotten stronger. At points, it was almost gagging me. I ate, relaxed, and cracked open another cold one and quickly convinced myself that come morning light, I was out of there, back home where I belonged, and thought about how to go about selling the place. That's when all hell broke loose. There came a sound that seemed to start behind the cabin, like a loud that turned into thunderous howls like I had never heard in my life. It seemed to surround the cabin. And then the bangs. I thought the damn wall was going to cave in. The whole side of the cabin rocked as something massive continued to batter it. My eyes were huge, looking toward every window, glancing to reassure myself the doors were locked, and the hammering of what I can only say sounded like giant fists began pounding the walls again. I figured the smell of fish must have brought a very hungry bear who realized nothing tasty was outside, and if he wanted to eat, he had to get inside. I slowly crept my way back to the window on the side of the cabin, trying to stay tight to the walls. My breath was almost like a hot, panting dog as I went into a full-blown panic attack. I peeked to try to see what was out the window and not draw attention to myself. But then I saw it. It had to be damn near 9 feet tall, covered in a thick, dark coat, and was most definitely not a bear. Our eyes met. It bared its teeth, a huge mouth exposed, and yellow eyes narrowed in anger and rage. And again, it let out with a wailing, guttural howl. I couldn't move. It knew I was terrified. It turned and moved toward the front of the cabin, and it moved fast. I ran and threw my weight against the door, holding it for all it was worth, and it began charging the door, hitting it over and over, grunting and howling. I just cried out, "For God's sakes, leave me alone! I'll leave in the morning! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" I had no idea what I was apologizing for, but I knew I wanted it to end. Then the sound of something letting out a loud came from the back of the cabin. Holy God, there are two of them, I thought. The one at the front stopped pounding and howled back. Then I heard it take off running. Then there was nothing. No sound, no crickets, no howls, no noise of any kind. I thought, screw this. I grabbed my keys and my jacket, threw open the door of the cabin, ran as fast as my wobbly legs would take me. I jumped in, gunned the engine, pulled out, leaving a dust trail a mile long as I drove as fast as I could through the woods and down that little dirt road. I never looked back. I never stopped. I just hauled ass and didn't stop until I got home and was safely inside my garage. I'm not embarrassed to admit, I cried like a baby. I shook and I cried, and I never returned to that cabin. I tried to sell it, but I just never could. I just let it alone and never returned, and I never will.